gamers, and welcome to another video here with the Meeple Maven. It's the board gaming strategy channel where we teach you the skills you need to get from a gaming beginner to a gaming champion. In today's video, we're going to cover a concept that will help you no matter what kind of game you're playing, and that's the idea of action economy. So we're going to start by explaining the concept, getting you to understand it, and then give you some tips and tricks for how to maximize your action economy and come out on top in your next game. So what is action economy? Well, put simply, action economy is who can use their actions in the game the most efficiently. Now, it's kind of like getting the most bang for your buck, except for when it comes to board games, the currency that we're talking about here is the actions that you take throughout the game. So we're going to take a look at some examples of this concept, and then we're going to give you the tips and the tricks for how to use this concept to frame your thoughts and get ahead the next time you play. So let's imagine we're now playing a game of Wingspan. Now, in the game of Wingspan, each player is given the same number of actions. So they get 8 actions in round 1, 7 in round 2, 6 in round 3, and 5 in round 4. So that comes out to a total of 26 actions that each player gets to take. Now, in this circumstance, if we take that and we break it down and we say, well, who is scoring the most points per action, then we're going to understand who's going to win that game just based on the action economy. Who's getting the most points out of each of their actions since they have the same amount of actions. So that's the concept there in a nutshell. But now we're going to look at some specific techniques you can employ to use that concept to your advantage. Alright, so the first way to get ahead on action economy is actually to get more actions than the other players. So if you're playing a new game, or maybe you're playing a game you've always played, look for opportunities to get additional actions that your other players don't have. So ways that this might happen is, let's say we're playing a worker placement game like viticulture. There's an opportunity to place at a certain location and get extra workers. So many worker placement games are going to give you an opportunity to have an extra worker. By placing that extra worker, you get more actions than your opponents, which is going to allow you to score more points. Now, the second way that we can get more actions than our opponents is taking actions that give us additional free actions after the fact. So if we look at Arc Nova, for example, cards with determination like the Bald Eagle or the Golden Eagle, those are considered some of the most powerful cards in the games because they allow you to take 2 actions in one turn, which is much stronger. You're getting an entire extra action. So when everyone else takes, 25 actions, you get 26 because you took a whole extra action. Same is true in something like Castles of Burgundy. When you choose a tile that lets you get another action, such as the castle tile, that can be a great benefit to you in that example there. So those are 2 examples of how you can get ahead by getting extra actions that your opponents weren't able to get. Now the second way that we can look at improving our action efficiency is trying to identify actions that are low value, low impact, or 0-point actions, right? So going back to when we were looking at Wingspan, for example, the action on the top row and the bottom row to much the same extent, when you're going to the top row and you're taking only a resource, right, which will eventually net you points, that action in and of itself is not netting you any points. So oftentimes these kind of setup actions or actions where you're forced to take resources, that you'll eventually turn into points, those actions in and of themselves are not scoring you points. And so if we can figure out ways where we have to take less of those actions, then we're eliminating and reducing the number of 0-point, no-value actions that we have to take. So that's another thing to think about. How can you get resources, get money, do whatever you need to do, but do it without taking a lot of these actions that don't score you points. The third concept here is to be efficient. So whenever there's a chance to do multiple things in one action, or you have the opportunity to buy up to 2 things or buy 3 things, you want to make sure that you're maximizing and using your actions as efficiently as possible. So some examples of this would be in Great Western Trail, if you go to the neutral building where you can buy additional workers, you have the option of buying either 1 or 2 workers. Now, if we're thinking strictly from an action economy standpoint, you're going to want to try to always be buying 2 workers because it's more efficient. You're using 1 action to get 2 workers. So for that reason, thinking about action economy, that's going to be more efficient than stopping there in twice to get 1 worker each time. Another example, one of the best actions in the game Brass Birmingham is to do a double rail action. So it actually ends up costing you a little more money, but you're able to build 2 rails in 1 action, which can net you, upwards of 10 to 12 points in 1 action, as opposed to, building 1 rail at a time, and then you have to spend 2 actions for the same number of points. So these are examples of how you can use actions efficiently, but you should be able to apply this logic to your future games, no matter what game you're playing, and just think, am I getting everything I can out of this action? Am I using it in the most efficient way possible? Alright, and one of the other tricks here is, how can I get advantages on other people's turns, other people's actions? So if you can do an action that's going to get you residual income, or it's going to score you points throughout the game, that's the kind of action that is really beneficial. So, some examples of this is if we build buildings and take the build action in Lords of Waterdeep, we're going to do that early on, and then when other players place on our buildings, we get a benefit every time an opponent uses our building. Similarly, in Great Western Trail, you can build buildings that will tax the opponents, and then in Wingspan, there's birds with the pink power, and what that does is whenever an opponent does a certain thing, you're able to do an action yourself. So trying to find ways where you can get actions during other people's turns, or get benefits during other people's turns, that's a way to kind of cheat on the action economy situation here. So another good thing to look out for. Alright, now the last concept here that I want to talk about is planning ahead. So now that you're starting to kind of understand what to think about, and how to get your brain around thinking about, am I using my actions efficiently? Am I getting better action economy than my opponents? The key here is planning ahead. So, most games you're going to be taking a lot of actions over the course of the game, and sometimes you might take 1 or 2 or 3, you might, do a lot of really good actions and you think you're doing great, but then you kind of back yourself into a corner, and I might take 1 hyper efficient action, but then I have to take 4 or 5 really bad actions right afterwards. Or I might take an action not thinking about what my opponents are doing, and then the next action that I want to take is blocked off or unavailable. So kind of use the tips I've given you thus far as a foundation, but make sure you're thinking 1, 2, or 3 moves ahead, so that you're always leaving yourself good options throughout the game, and you never get stuck in a corner. If you like the tips of today's video, please do us a favor and subscribe or like the video below. Also, you can check out some of our other videos. We cover topics about general board gaming strategy, specific deep dives on some of the games that you might play, and then also understanding the mechanics behind some of your favorite games. So take a look at some of our other videos, give us a like, and keep on gaming.